We are doing Extra Life again this year, where you can mash buttons, roll dice, play games, and help kids along the way. I hope you'll be a part of that with us. Stick around after the video for more information. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. We've got a ton going on here at Spirit Blade Productions and Christian Geek Central, including our in-depth Bible study for geeks, movie, game, and other entertainment reviews or commentary, live streams, Christian geek news, original audio dramas, and tons more. And on top of all that, you can become a Spirit Blade insider with an influential voice and get access to exclusive content and rewards. It's your involvement as a patron that will keep all of this going and growing, so I want to thank you for your consideration in that. For more information, please check out our Patreon page through the link below at patreon.com/spiritbladeproductions. Thanks for listening. Well, my editing skills are crap, but can the same thing be said about Hereditary? Stick around and find out. Hey, I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. This is my uncut review of Hereditary, which I had the chance to watch recently. It recently came out on home video. I missed it when it was in theaters, partially in large part because I wasn't sure from the trailers what kind of movie it was, if it was merely a psychological horror movie or if it was actually a supernatural horror movie. I only review like really imaginative, fantastical type of entertainment content. So if it was merely psychological, and in that sense more realistic, type of horror, then I wasn't going to review it for Christian Geek Central. But I learned after the fact that it was actually very much a supernatural horror movie. The synopsis on IMDb for Hereditary reads, "After the family matriarch passes away, a grieving family is haunted by tragic and disturbing occurrences and begin to unravel dark secrets." And really, I wouldn't want to say a whole lot more about the details of the plot, because that's really like a lot of what the experience is figuring out what is going on? What the crap is the deal here, And the way that happens is over the course of the movie, more information just organically comes out as you hear these characters talk about their past, specifically about this grown daughter played by Toni Collette, unless her name is pronounced Collette, I'm not sure. I'm going to say Collette. She plays this adult daughter whose mother, who I'll refer to now as the grandmother, just passed away at the beginning of the story. And so in the fallout of that, there are just kind of creepy, kind of ghost story type elements, apparitions that seem to be appearing and stuff. And also this woman just dealing with looking back on her really screwed up childhood because of what we learn is her really screwed up, mother who just passed away. So it is what I would describe as a supernatural horror drama, which I'm trying to think if I've ever seen another movie. I think I probably have, but not that really emphasizes the drama and the groundedness of the scary content. Usually there's something just kind of like weird and fantastical going on in these type of stories, but this is, as I learned after watching the movie, a movie that was written and directed based on very intense real-world occult research. And I have not done very much reading into real world occult stuff. I've got a few books, like maybe one or two on the subject, but just knowing as little as I do, watching this movie, I was like, this has a decidedly realistic vibe to their treatment of the supernatural elements. Realistic not in that I would affirm the truth claims found in occult belief systems, but realistic in that this reflects beliefs and practices that are real, that people actually take part in and affirm in their lives today. As far as like the vibe of the movie, the feel of the movie, like I said, it is kind of a ghost story, at least at the start, where the creepiness and scares and stuff are mostly about visions and apparitions and stuff like that. But there's also some disturbing, violent, tragic kind of content, not just like horror movies that like go for gore and stuff like that. Oh my gosh, what am I seeing? It's so horrible and liquidy and stuff like that. No, this is more, the violence is more disturbing, for how grounded it is and the nature of it. I really don't want to say more than that. It's tragic violence and disturbing at the same time. And yeah, it's hard to categorize this in this as horror because of all the tropes that brings up that this movie just does not really partake in. It's very grounded. It's not dependent on otherworldly creature designs, but rather on creepy figures in the shadows that you suddenly realize are present in the frame, but you almost can't see them, It deals with kind of fear of the creepy, fear of the unknown, like a Lovecraft, an H.P. Lovecraft story would. But if you go deep enough into a Lovecraft-inspired story, it's almost always going to take you to some bizarre visuals that are just like, what am I looking at? Like weird things with tentacles or people with their bodies twisted and walking on their, walking backwards and stuff on their hands and feet, And this isn't doing that. It's doing creepy, unknown, disturbing stuff and some imagery that goes along with that, but not in that usual Lovecraftian sense. And it is not at a disadvantage for that. In fact, I found it more disturbing for how grounded it was in real-world accounts of people dealing with supernatural, dark supernatural things, It's often a quiet movie, but I was never bored watching this. And I was even watching it on a night where I was actually very tired. The quiet scenes usually contained some oddness to them that made me kind of lean forward and go like, what? And wonder what the crap was going on, where this movie was headed next, I don't think there's a single jump scare in the entire movie. And I hate jump scares. I find them very cheap. They don't hold up for me on repeat viewing because I know when they're coming. For me, I really appreciate things that are unsettling because those are only refreshed upon repeat viewings for me. And this movie is not about jump scares. It is all about unsettling you and getting deep under your skin. But unlike Lovecraft, which is similarly those kinds of stories are going for unsettling you, getting under your skin, unlike Lovecraft, who again deals in more fantastical, otherworldly dread, this movie is much more grounded in real and disturbing occult beliefs and practices. Now, probably, I don't know, but probably very exaggerated from the norm in practicing occult circles, but still very much based in those real-world beliefs. Because of this, I find myself sitting here and having a hard time thinking, who would I recommend this movie to that I know personally, or even some of you that I've gotten to know a little bit online. I'm thinking, who would I recommend this to? I don't know of anyone that I don't even know that I would recommend it to myself if I could go back in time. But we'll get to that shtick in a minute. Even Christians who are fans of supernatural horror, I would pause and say, I don't know, because I like horror, not necessarily supernatural horror. Sometimes I'm in the mood for that. I tend to more like monster, creature feature type stuff. But man, I don't know who to recommend this to. I think that horror is fine. I think it's a healthy form of entertainment when we approach it like a haunted house, something that we know is fake, but we kind of like to artificially test our quote-unquote courage against, and then, we can kind of have a laugh afterward at how we were scared by this thing that, is obviously fake and on a screen and stuff like that, or we can marvel at the creative imagination involved in the scary creatures or ideas and stuff. I think that there can be horror experiences that are totally healthy, but this one borrows so much from real-world occult practices that some parts of it just kind of made me feel gross or sad and disturbed at the thought of people in the real world investing their lives in these beliefs and practices and thinking about the devastating consequences, setting aside, the kind of like over exaggerated horror elements. I mean, messing around with the occult can lead to some horrible things in both this life and the next, but it can lead to horrible devastation in this life. That is plenty horrible without going to the extremes that this movie takes it to. And so because of that, I kind of was a little bit down while I was watching this movie, just like, oh my gosh, And that's, I think, one of the reasons why I add and really want to emphasize the word drama to this experience. It's not just a family drama. I think it's a drama also in the sense of, if you believe that in some sense, some elements of what they're talking about in this movie are real, and that people can actually totally screw up their lives by getting involved in this kind of stuff, then there's something really tragic about the viewing experience, I think, if you take that worldview into the movie with you. That said, the occult, I want to be clear, is not glorified in this movie. Sometimes the occult can be glorified. Often it's not in horror movies. It's usually glorified in kind of adventure movies where you have a hero who is leveraging the occult in some way to empower them to fight the true evil in the movie or something like that, This is in no way glorifying the occult as far as I'm concerned, this movie. Even when the protagonists temporarily embrace it, the results turn against them horribly. This movie presents the occult as something to stay away from, not get mixed up in, and not something that can bring peace or empowerment. In fact, quite the opposite in this movie. Let me talk briefly about the cast. Well, maybe not so briefly, longer than I usually do, probably. I loved the cast performances in this movie. Toni Collette leads the cast for most of the movie, I should say, as the daughter of the recently deceased grandmother. I've usually seen her in roles that are character roles or in smaller films, such as the more recent film Please Stand By, which I've reviewed and would recommend checking out. She is a fantastic actress as far as I'm concerned. She's wonderful in this movie as this broken, bitter daughter and mother trying to hold her life together despite massive dysfunction, both within herself and in those around her. Alex Wolff plays her son. I'd seen him recently in Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle, where he plays that main kind of nerdy kid who then gets put into the body of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, So anyway, he plays their son in this movie. I really enjoyed him in this movie. I was really just taken in by his performance. And he becomes more prominent near the end of the movie and carries that part really well. I really look forward to seeing him do more in the future. My only question was why there was no mention of him in this movie, in this story, being adopted or having a different biological dad, because ethnically he looks like an impossible product to come from the two actors that were cast as his parents in this movie. So that was a little odd. I was kind of always waiting for are we going to hear something about how he was adopted or something like that? That never happens. And so I was just kind of left going, that aspect of the casting is unusual. But everything else about the casting of Alex Wolff I'm really grateful for, because I was really taken in by him in this movie. Millie Shapiro plays the enigmatic young Charlie, who's probably featured far more of the two children in the promo material for this movie. And her character is fragile and at the same time creepy for her odd behavior and withdrawn personality, so I really appreciated that casting there as well. I love that this movie seemed to be cast like an independent movie. By that I mean the best actors is what they seem to be going after, the best actors for these roles. Maybe they were, going in some ways for their look and casting based on their look, some as well, but none of these actors, they were solid actors, and I would say that none of them were what I would call classic beauties or pretty boys as we typically think of them in Hollywood. They have striking, sometimes rugged features that are just not the norm for Hollywood, and I love it. I love that they're casting these kinds of faces in this movie. I mean, they feel more like real people that I've met and that I run into, every day. If Hollywood is ever somehow, I know this is a crazy fantasy, but if they are ever held accountable by audiences at large, this is something that the vast majority of moviegoers would have to decide they want to hold, they'd have to decide that they want this change. But if it were to happen that audiences would say, hey, we don't want to be catered to with these actors that are prioritized in their casting because of their broadly, attractive faces or familiar faces or whatever. And if instead we, as consumers would say, man, we really want the best performances and the best casting choices for these particular roles that could possibly be done to make this movie happen, then I think that we would have far more high quality performances in our movies and varied casting that emphasize immersion in story over just kind of like broadly or generically attractive and familiar faces. So I would love to see that happen. I can't imagine that it will before Jesus comes, but in the meantime, wow, really appreciate the casting in this movie. As far as the stunts and visuals, the visual effects are very minimal, and that's a strength of this movie. It's much more about lighting and those creepy background images that you suddenly realize are present. So great choices visually for this kind of story. So as far as the themes, I like to talk about, are there any moral, philosophical, or spiritual themes that might trigger worthwhile thoughts in us, or conversation that maybe could come out of seeing this movie with somebody else? I think there is, of course, the obvious supernatural and occult material to think about. I've already talked about that some, and again, I appreciate that the movie is a cautionary tale about the occult rather than a glorification of it. I think that there's also, and I would say this not because I took this from the movie itself, but after reading an interview with the director and writer of this movie, he talked about how it was in some ways cathartic because of some experiences that he had, I think, growing up or something like that. And he didn't go into any more detail about that. So I don't know what he had in mind, but it got my mind thinking about the other ways that this movie could be viewed, in what ways it could be cathartic, that would be a little bit more of a normal experience than getting mixed up in the occult. And I think that as we consider that, there's the possible theme here of dealing with your childhood and the elements of your childhood that you are not happy with. When people reach their early to mid-adult years, they often start looking back on their childhood and seeing their parents in a new light, sometimes a negative one, and having kids of your own can cause you to look back and see some faults in your parents and the choices they made while raising you, and cause you to resolve to just do differently and determine that you're not going to make those same mistakes with your own kids. So there's possibly a parallel there. I think this movie actually, and this is speculation on my part, but I think it better parallels the situation of being an adult and dealing with some serious wrongs done to you by your parents when you were a child. Possibly even wrongs that are genuinely abusive in nature. As this movie progresses, we learn more and more about how horribly abusive this grandmother was to her own daughter, just in like psychologically, just in jacked up ways, not necessarily like beating her and stuff, but just totally warping her, and the way she treated her, and just totally devalued her. I mean, wow. And that daughter in this story, now as an adult, is navigating her own destroyed life while unintentionally inflicting abuse on her own family. And that is such a common story, to see people that have been horribly abused in one way or another by their parents, then actually carrying out the same form or just a modified form of that abuse on other people in their lives or on their children. I think in this light, the movie can potentially serve as a call to those who have been abused to seek out the help they need in order to break those cycles and find healing from people that can help them. Though I do have to admit, this is a bit of speculation as far as the intent of the movie or the possible application of the movie, and I think that most people will probably not have that parallel in mind as they experience this movie. They'll probably just be thinking about, this is really creepy and unsettling, So, I have no idea what your tastes are in movies, but if I were a time traveler, I would go back in time and say, Peter, I don't know, dude. I don't know. So many things about this movie are made in ways that you will really appreciate. Other elements are disturbing in ways that don't delight or entertain, but just make you feel sad and just kind of will bring you down a bit. Now, that kind of experience may have its place now and then in your life. You know, movies are not always about making you feel good. Sometimes they're making you feel bad in ways that will bring about something good, some good reflection in your life, you know. But man, Pater, just know going in that this is a realistically dark and heavy supernatural drama like nothing you've seen before, and that if it is ultimately worth seeing, you may not ever feel drawn to watch again. All right, it's rated R for horror, violence, disturbing images, language, drug use, and brief graphic nudity. One comment on the nudity is that it is non-sexualized, featuring overweight and unappealing bodies that are dimly lit. I don't want to say that as an excuse. That's just to give you more information about the nature of it, so you can kind of decide for yourself what you're okay with subjecting yourself to. I do think that it's still a form of objectification, but in a different way, not as objects of lust for the viewer. So anyway, there you have it. Those are my thoughts. I'd love to get yours in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, and after you've done that, click that notification bell so you know when the next video is coming out. We've launched a Patreon for Christian Geek Central. You can go check out patreon.com/spiritblade productions for info on the rewards you can get for supporting this work as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. November 3rd, Dragon Quest XI and Spider-Man for PS4 are coming out within 3 days of each other. I'm going to try and review both games. I don't have time to make a brand new Extra Life recruitment bumper. November 3rd. Once again this year, Christian Geek Central is participating in Extra Life. This is a charity that raises funds for the Children's Miracle Network of hospitals, which provides free medical care to children whose families could otherwise not afford it. And this is very often for critical, life-saving treatment. Joining our team only requires a willingness to ask your family and friends to consider donating toward your fundraising efforts. Participants also usually do something fun and game-related to draw attention to their fundraising efforts, like a special game night at your home or your church. Or like me, you could do a crazy 24-hour video gaming marathon. Now, I'm theming it around video games, but really this event can be themed around any kind of gaming, which includes both video games and tabletop games of any kind. What you do to raise funds is entirely up to you, but I would love for you to consider joining the Christian Geek Central Extra Life team. As team leader, I'll be there to help answer your questions, provide some helpful tips if I can, and just in general be your fundraising cheerleader and try to draw attention myself to your fundraising efforts. You can get more information about the event as a whole at extra-life.org, and if you choose to sign up there, be sure to select Christian Geek Central as your team so I can get in touch with you and then just help in whatever way I can. Fundraising can begin at any time, but our main push is going to be through the month of October leading up to November 3rd. That's the annual Extra Life Game Day, when I'll be streaming my 24-hour video gaming marathon live and trying to stay awake without throwing up. More details on my live stream as we get closer to it. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.